Hello, guys. I wanted to talk with you tonight about Adfontes Media, a company that makes media bias charts, specifically what they call their signature product, interactive media bias chart, as they refer to it. It's online. Just Google it, and you'll find the site with the chart. I know it's not as easy as doing the links in the description, but I haven't really gotten that far with my channel yet. Anyway, so what I wanted to engage with you guys about a little bit is this exercise that I played around with, because I used the tool. I used this interactive media bias chart, and I noticed that there were some, the way that they do it, so they take dozens or even hundreds of news stories from a particular news organization. So it's interactive in the extent that that the graph initially shows some 50 plus news organizations and their position along this bias map, but you can also select to see one or more. You can narrow it down to just one news company. So in that instance, I looked up the big three, which I would call, if name the biggest three news organizations, it would be Fox, CNN, and MSNBC. Those are the ones that from my perspective they seem to dominate as far as their main TV, their main anchors, their main personalities. So you can pinpoint to you can select it to just one news organization at a time. So I wanted to take the big three, and I wanted to kind of find what the most average, because where they place the icon for, let's say, Fox News. Fox News is placed where it is on the graph because of the little pinpoints all around it. Like, let's say there's 100 news stories. There's 100 pinpoints that surround Fox News, or that plot where Fox News is going to be positioned on the map. Certain news stories have a larger amount of views. They're more popular, so they're weighted more heavily. All that considered, without pulling out the graph and showing it in front of you, or guiding, without doing that, I will say that you can kind of get a sense of, some dots are positioned much closer to the icon itself. Where Fox News is located is an average of all these points. So the individual point that represents a news story that happens to be positioned closest to Fox or CNN or MSNBC, that's what I aim to find. The most Foxiest of Fox, the foxiest of Fox News stories, the most CNN of CNN stories, the most MSNBC of MSNBC stories. I hope that you're following me here. So for CNN, spoiler, the overarching theme here between these three most newsiest of news stories for each of these three categories, the overarching theme is Trump. Go figure. So for CNN, headline: emails show Stephen Miller targeted Rubio, had editorial sway at Breitbart. So that's where you would. So that's CNN being as CNN as possible, as in as in that news article was plotted as close as possible in the XY axis to the CNN icon. So it's obviously, so there's very little distance between the CNN icon and one of the and this news story that was plotted next to it. So so that's interesting that's close to, so like I guess it's not a science, and it was just a fun little exercise, and the idea just being like, I'm trying to find a news story that's particularly, I want to see how close these pinpoints, these individual news stories are to what they claim is where that particular news organization deserves to be on that map. So CNN, that was theirs. For MSNBC, headline: Trump struggles to explain the culture of lawlessness around him. And so there you go. Those two are clearly about. Those two stories are clearly about Trump. The CNN one, it talks. It's about emails that go back to 2015, and Stephen Miller being a top advisor with Trump, who previously had worked at Breitbart, who I guess in his position at Breitbart went after, targeted Rubio because Rubio was the closest thing to a competitor in I think Rubio dropped out before Cruz, but Rubio and Cruz were probably the only ones who even stood a chance, and they really didn't. So there's a bias there, but CNN's trying to point out that bias. MSNBC's Trump struggles to explain the culture of lawlessness around him. I mean, that's pretty general. Let's see. In Fox's, this is the most foxiest of Fox. Headline: Herschel Walker claps back at Biden's Antifa. Herschel Walker claps back at Biden's "Antifa is an idea" comment. Antifa is an idea, in quotes there. So some context: Herschel Walker, I guess, is an NFL player, or at least an ex-NFL player. I guess he'd been making statements back in October about around the time of the debates, criticizing Biden's. I guess he made a statement saying that Antifa is just an idea or something along those lines, which maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I mean, whoever's in charge of Antifa, I haven't been able to pinpoint. I don't know if anybody has. Maybe they don't really have a leader. So I don't really know what they're about. But yeah. So I thought that was interesting there too. But anyway, so yeah, those are three examples. This is an exercise. So don't take this with a grain of salt. There's not much. It's a subject matter that I'm just poking around in, trying to figure out, okay, well, what is the most average news story that, based on the way that these news organizations are plotted on the map, and they're each plotted based on the average position of all of their news stories, what would be the most average news story for one of these organizations based on where they're plotted? That's just an exercise I was trying. I want to mess around with this some more. It's pretty interesting. Although, again, I will say that I found I found that this whole concept of the way that they plotted it, and this Ad Fontes Media isn't. They're not unique in that. They all the maps that I've seen like this are they look similar. They might even be the same. It might even be the same one that I saw a year and a half ago. I'm not entirely sure. All I know is for this one, for the Ad Fontes Media graph, this or map, there seemed to be, well, it kind of lost my train of thought there. But anyway, I guess what I'm saying is I think that it's a tool that you can use. It's not useful for everything. It's you wouldn't take a hammer to a screw. So I think it's a good guide, but you're not going to just if you're flipping through if you're watching TV and you're flipping through the guide, you're not going to you have a very generalized idea of what's on TV, but you don't really you're an out you get about as much information looking at this map of media biases as you would you get as much of a clear perspective about politics by looking at these media organizations on the map as you would as how much you could learn about what you're going to watch on TV based on the TV guide. You see the descriptions, but you don't really know. Like if you haven't seen The Simpsons, no amount of description in the TV guide is going to prepare you for what you're about to see. But anyway, so yeah, I think it's a useful tool. Clearly, I'm engaged in it. I want to continue using it. I just, and I encourage anybody who watches this to take a look at it too. Again, it's called Ad Fontes Media, and it's the interactive media bias chart. But I will say that the idea that any biased news source is unreliable, just simply because they're biased, I think is unfair. And I do think that media in general is the real political divide in media, as well as the country at large, comes down to class. It has little to do with right or left wing ideology. But anyway, thank you for listening.